Okay, hi kids, welcome back to BackSeat Drivers Podcast. Today we have the fabulous Louise Goodman.
In this episode, she tells us exactly how she became a leading motorsport reporter.
From the start, I want to be a motorsport pundit / commentator.
Nope, there was no want to work in TV either.
She discusses inappropriate comments made by male colleagues.
And he went, yeah, I've been pretending it's your nipple and caressing it gently.
He said this on TV.
She also tells us what it's like to work with Formula One drivers.
I had a funny incident with Johnny Herbert as well, which, in this day and age, we would both have been in so much trouble for it.
We also discuss female anatomy.
I'm competitive. I don't want to be the fastest driver with tits, as I used to call it. I just want to be the fastest driver.
Gus clashes with Louise.
I don't care what they stand for. I found it very difficult to like her.
Should we change the subject?
We also get her opinion on the all-girls series F1 Academy.
Instinctively, I'm not a fan of single-sex series. I've always applauded the fact that I think it's motor racing, equestrian, sailing, the three sports where men and women can truly compete on equal footing. But
Don't forget, if you like our content, please like and subscribe. We beg you. We need your support. We need to grow and beat our competitors. Enjoy the episode.
this feels really funny sitting opposite you two.
How does it feel being interviewed by us?
Yeah, this is a bit different. Roles have reversed, haven't they?
It's proper role reversal.
It is weird.
It's like, I was going to say the lunatics are taking over the asylum. That's a little bit strong, isn't it?
What?
I haven't seen
lunatics?
that. What's that?
The
Sorry.
phrase.
Oh, is it the phrase? I thought it was a movie. I thought it was a movie.
Right. So, when did you find your love for motorsport? I want to go back to little Louise. When did you get into it?
Not motorsport per se. Sorry, that's my dog shuffling around that you can hear in the background. So, not motorsport per se, but I just think I came out loving wheels and an engine. I can remember as a little kid the thrill of, when my father got home from work, I was allowed to park the car in the garage and driving around as a real teeny one, when I couldn't nowhere near the pedals, but, just like steering the car around picnic areas in the New Forest on the way to and from seeing my grandparents. And so I just liked things with wheels and engines. And then a lot of my misspent youth was misspent on the back of mates' motorbikes. And in fact, there was a friend amongst that kind of on the outreaches of that gang who raced as well. Not that we ever went to see him race, but yeah, it just, I don't know, is the answer. I think, some girls.
You just had it from the start.
Yeah, it was just there in me.
Sorry. Yeah, no, but sorry, my bad. So how does someone become a motorsport reporter like you have from the early days? Obviously, fast forward later on, obviously you had a passion for it, but so many people want to know, how do I get a job in motorsport? Because it's not really a conventional route like we see in other jobs in the corporate world. How do you actually get a job?
Well, I'm a really bad example because I just say to people I fell into it, which is really quite true. So I never set out to work in motorsport. I never set out to work in racing. It all came about as a kind of set of happy circumstance. I mean, I had no involvement in racing. My family had no involvement in racing. The only slight connection I had with racing was I grew up in a town in Hampshire called Alresford, which is where Derek Warwick and Paul Warwick were from. So I used to walk past Warwick Trailers, the family business, on my way to school every morning. Somebody had a seriously cool Mark II Ford Capri, orange, with the lovely, lattice windows at the back that was parked outside, which always caught my eye. And we used to read about Derek. He was racing stock cars at the time. We used to read about him in the local paper, but I had no desire whatsoever to work in motorsport. Didn't even watch it particularly at home. I had a bit of a thing for James Hunt when I was a kid, but every girl my age had a bit of a thing for James Hunt.
Yeah.
He was just like the cool dude of the time. So I kind of fell into it. I started out working in powerboat racing. That came about through family friends whose business was building offshore powerboats. Through that, met people who worked in racing. Through that, got a job working for a PR company, and it just kind of went from there. So as I say, I meet so many people now and chat with so many youngsters who really want to kind of do my job, and it's like, oh, how do I? It's like, well, I don't know really, you know.
So
I do have a bit of an idea, but there is no, as you say, there's no set career path. There's no. It's not like being a doctor. You know, you go and do a degree, you do this, or even being an engineer, or in other forms of motorsport. You know, if you look at people working in the business now, I mean, you look at somebody like Ariana Bravo, who's you know, great young reporter who's come into the business recently. You know, her background's accountancy, so you couldn't get much further from it. So there is no set prescribed route. If you spoke to everybody who does my job, they'd have come about it from a different way.
So you fell into it. It wasn't like from the start, I want to be a motorsport pundit / commentator.
No, didn't. I wasn't. There was no want to work in TV either.
Really?
No, I am. You know. My career has been a set of happy circumstance, really. I think you've got to be open to opportunities, and you've got to obviously have the acumen. I like to think I work hard. I am competitive, and I think to work in motorsport, and you look at, you know, don't need to tell you two about being competitive, and because you both are. So you've got to have that edge about you, because you've got to enjoy the sport. I'll often say to people, it's not a job, it's a way of life, because it is. It is all consuming. The amount of birthdays and anniversaries and mates parties I've missed over the years, but that's fine. It's
sociable and antisocial, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but, you know, trust me, I've had some social times through my job as well.
The thing is, you actually meet people that you connect with naturally anyway, because you share a passion. So when you go to, you work with your friends, I guess, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think even nowadays it's quite, I suppose, different, where a lot of people are getting work based on like content creation. It's what we've learned with this. Like, a lot of people
on the bandwagon.
Yeah, we're hopping on the bandwagon. We're still early, but so a lot of presenters, they're almost reporting themselves. They're seeing Formula One topics, maybe something that's happened on the weekend, discussing it, growing a channel, growing like a personal brand. So it's quite, I suppose, different now, isn't it, in that sense?
100%. And there are a couple of other people who I've sort of had contact with over the last couple of years who, you know, they've come into the sport that way. They've been making little videos that they've posted up on YouTube. You know, somebody's seen them, or they've, I mean, I ran or was involved with a day that Porsche organised a couple of years ago, which was trying to kind of get more young girls into the sport. So Porsche laid on a fantastic day. They hired Brands Hatch for the day. They had drivers there with cars. They were doing other stuff with it as well. But so we had a bunch of girls down there, myself and Alan Hyde, who you guys will know. But for those who don't, Alan is a legendary, you know, trackside, does my job at trackside for the British Touring Car Championship. So Alan and I basically kind of ran classes. We divided the girls into two groups and did a bit of reporting, a bit of, you know, interviewing, that kind of thing. And that was full of girls who had a passion for doing the job, but were just doing stuff, you know, watching Grand Prix and then doing reports on it that they were posting on whatever platform it might be. And so that is a way of getting into the industry that's come about, obviously, in the last few years. There's quite a few people who are making their way through that route.
So do you think your advice to young women or anyone trying to get into like commentary, punditry, reporting, being a journalist, whatever it is, you would suggest to basically start pumping out your own content and just see how it works? Yeah,
well, I would suggest, because I think a lot of people think, and particularly in the last few years, obviously the Netflix impact on F1 has been massive. There's this whole new groundswell of Formula One fans who think they're racing fans, who don't necessarily understand the ins and outs of racing, don't necessarily understand that actually, you know, working in the industry, it is work first and foremost. So no, you're not just going to be swanning off to a Grand Prix and having a lovely time hanging out with the Formula One drivers. That's not what it's all about. So yes, you've got to enjoy the sport, otherwise you wouldn't put the time and effort into it, but it is first and foremost a job. So I think, I can't remember what the question was that you asked.
I think it was like, what you'd recommend someone getting into it to.
So what I recommend to people is prove to me that you want to work in this industry, not you want to hang around in
just
the paddock.
F1.
So I'll say to people, don't aim for F1. Aim for F1, but you know, I started out, I'd been to Grand Prix all around the world before I'd ever been to Walton Park, you know, which is a very lucky situation to be in. But I think do it the other way around. Prove that you actually want to work. Go to your local racetrack. Offer up your services free of charge. I've had a couple of the girls who came on that day with Porsche I mentioned, they subsequently kept in contact with Porsche, who said, right, come along and do some interviews with our drivers. And then they got out and they chatted to people and then 3 races later, one of them's there making social media pieces for one of the touring car teams. And that's how you prove you want to work in the industry.
Yeah,
another girl who I met again through Southern Car Club, which is the car club that I'm the vice president of. She came to us and was just doing social media stuff for us. Cut forward 3 years, she's working at Motorsport UK and has been for a number of years now. So you've got to prove that you actually want to work in the industry, not just want to fluff around in the paddock.
There's such a misconception as well, I think, with we spoke about it with most of our drivers that we've had on as well. There's such a misconception with, we were speaking to Joseph Loke, who did Formula 3 this year. And again, I gave my perspective on Porsche Super Cup, which was also racing on the Formula 1 weekends. And there's such a misconception from our friends and people that know us even, and just the general public, that think that we're all earning loads of money and we're hanging out with Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton and we're all going clubbing.
You can't even get close to them, can you? If you're one of the support paddocks, as you well know, you can't get into the F1 paddock.
Well, the support paddock's amazing, because I was in Abu Dhabi last weekend and I could go into the Formula 2 paddock and stuff and speak to Ollie Behrman and whatever. It's a really cool experience, but you are...
Clunk. Just name dropping over there.
Yeah, I'm name dropping. I know. Well, Ollie Behrman saw me once, guys. But you go into the F2 paddock, F3 paddock, Porsche. It's all quite, in the same area. It doesn't feel super exclusive, if you know what I mean. But the F1 boys are miles away. And that being said, as well, you're not staying. I don't know what it's like as a pundit, but you're definitely not staying in 5-star hotels. You're not traveling first or business class. So I think this Netflix Formula 1 fan thing that's just all racing is just glitz, glam, money, whatever.
Listen, I don't knock it in any way, shape or form, because it's brought a whole new groundswell of people in who are getting passionate about the sport. And it may well be that, some of them will drop off when the next big thing comes along, but hopefully a lot of them will hang around, because we needed a new generation of fans.
They did need
there is a bit of a downside, because some of them think they know everything about the sport and they know bugger all about the sport. So, and I think some of the tribalism that we've seen as well, but that's just life generally these days, isn't it? With sort of keyboard warriors, and so, but I think on the whole, though, having that new groundswell of people
get offended with the word keyboard warriors. We found as well.
Do they?
We've got plenty of
people. We've got a few of them.
Offended with so much stuff these days. Honestly, I'm old school when it comes to that. Yeah,
I was going to ask.
Grow a thicker skin.
Yeah, grow a thicker skin. On the topic of Drive to Survive,
yes,
love to get your take on it. You're obviously an expert in the sport. How realistic is Drive to Survive in your opinion?
Well, it's realistic in terms of it's real people, but it's a reality show. It's manipulated. I say manipulated. Everything has been filmed, but a little conversation at the back of a truck, that might be 2 people in Budapest saying, which plane are you on tonight? And then that turns up, as a
some driver
boss,
swap,
having a conversation in, name another circuit. So there's that element of it, but it's an entertainment show first and foremost. It's not a documentary. It's an entertainment show, and it's been hugely entertaining, hasn't it?
It definitely needed an injection, because I think under like Eccleston or whatever, it was just very prim, proper, no social media. He didn't want to move with the times, did he?
I don't think it was that he didn't want to. I think you've got to. Formula One would in no way, shape, or form be where it currently is without Bernie. Bernie took the sport and absolutely revolutionised it. And, nobody else wanted to invest their money in the TV side of things and all of that kind of stuff. Bernie was doing digital TV before digital TV was even a thing. Do you know what I mean? So, but it was a very commercial model. And I think if, there was that feeling that, you had to pay your way and everything had to be commercialised, and, you can't control social media. And there is that element of like if you look at, I worked for a traditional broadcaster. ITV paid a lot of money to be in that paddock. And then suddenly every other was, everyone's swanning around with the camera filming stuff. Well, hang on a minute, We paid for that privilege to have the camera in there. So
Yeah.
Bernie, in many ways, was protecting it. But things change, times change, and I think in some ways the fact that it is more open. There are pluses and minuses to everything. There were, as I said, the sport wouldn't be what it were without what Bernie set off and the commercial, acumen that he had to build it into the sport that it's become. But I think, the fact that is we do live in a different media age, so it needed to be out there everywhere on social media and everybody being able to do it. I remember actually when that rule was first relaxed, you was in Melbourne at the opening race of the season, which thankfully I still get to work there every year for the race organisers. And the paddock was full of really stressed press officers who suddenly having to learn how to operate little cameras and edit stuff. And because it was things they'd never had to do before.
Yeah.
They hadn't at that point got teams in doing it. So it was just like the traditional press officers were trying to do everything. All of that content creation alongside the traditional media stuff that they've been doing up to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And your time in Formula One.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Oh, it's been a blast, really. Yeah. I mean, how lucky have I been to, as we were saying, I kind of fell into doing it. I was working for a guy. I was working in powerboat racing, went to a barbecue, overheard a bloke behind me saying he was just setting up his own PR company and was looking for somebody to come and work for him. I, at the time, was planning to go off travelling. So my job at the magazine, I was editing it at that point, and I was looking for kind of an easier job so I could get an evening job as well and save up the money.
You're how old at this point?
Oh, early 20s.
Okay.
So I kind of turned around and said, "Oh, hello, I'm Louise. I just overheard you." It was a guy called Tony Jardine. So I was his first employee when he set up his PR company. And it just so happened that he had worked in motorsport. He, worked for Goodyear as a tyre fitter and come up through the sort of technical route, but had got into doing PR and was setting up his own PR company. So I was his first employee. So that was really how I ended up working in motorsport, just pure circumstance. So and that was back in long time ago, in mid-80s.
Right.
So quite a long time ago. But I literally I then went travelling. So it was my first. I did a few races. I came back, properly started working with him. I actually, when I was travelling, I worked with him down in Adelaide. So I arrived on the back of a motorbike.
So that's straight to Formula One.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's what I mean.
Early 20s. Literally
a bit of a different time then as well.
Very different.
You could just hop straight into it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, to be fair, when I first worked with Tony, my first client, bizarrely, was Derek Warwick. I mean, how weird is that? Talk about going full circle there. But we also, we launched Camel, RJ Reynolds, when Camel came into sponsoring the Lotus Formula One team. That was the first big gig that we ever did. So it was literally Tony and myself organised this big worldwide launch at a Heathrow hotel and had journalists flying in from all around the world and, Ayrton Senna and Satoru Nakajima were the two drivers. So that was like, that was my entree into Formula One. Had a very funny, sorry, that's my dog snoring. You can now hear. She's chill, isn't she? Had this very funny scenario with Senna, whereby Tony was looking after Senna's kind of interviews after the official launch, and I was looking after Nakajima's.
Yeah.
Understandably, more people wanted to speak to Senna. At one point, Ayrton disappeared, so Tony said, "Go and find him." So I kind of, dashed around behind the scenes, behind the curtain where we'd done the whole reveal of the car from, and there was Ayrton taking his overalls off. So in my naivety, I just went up to him and went, "Mate, we're not finished yet," zipped his overalls up and kind of, so, I had no idea there was, and I think Ayrton was so gobsmacked to be manhandled by this young whippersnapper. He just followed me out. And so that's the time that I came into Formula One, when it was, a team was small. I mean, cut forward 4 years when I joined Jordan Grand Prix, I was employee number 47. That was the entire team.
Really?
Wow. Yeah. So it takes more people than that, to put up the Red Bull motorhome these days, doesn't it?
And just for the viewers at this point, like, what exactly is your job in Formula One?
I'm a press officer.
Okay,
I'm a press officer. So I was the media department because, it was very small. So I would go to the races. So initially with Camel, Tony looked after the PR for the Lotus team. I looked after Camel also. They went on to sponsor teams like LaRousse, Lotus, Tyrrell, they had an involvement with them. So I would go to the Grand Prix after the sessions. I'd go and get the quotes from the drivers, which was really scary. I mean, some of those drivers, like Nelson Piquet, he just liked it. He could tell I was like a young, slightly nervous, young whippersnapper, and boy, did he take the mickey out of me, and in a nice
Really?
way.
How?
Just teasing,
banter
just
or
winding me, just winding me up.
Yeah, but when you're early 20s and it's your first job.
And there aren't any girls around either. There really weren't that many girls around then. So literally, as you walk, I remember the first time I walked down the paddock, you could virtually hear, you could see the elbows like going, "Whoa, look. New bird." Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there weren't very many of us around. Thank the Lord for people like Annie Bradshaw, who was already working in the sport, the legendary Annie Bradshaw. So Annie was like mum to me, kind of looked after me and took me under her wing. So it was just a very different environment. And so I was the press officer. I would then I became the press officer with Leighton House. So Tony got the contract with BP and they funded me as the press officer. So I would go to the races, just do all the media work. I'd write the press releases. I'd, facilitate all the interviews with journalists, try and promote the team to get extra interviews, extra coverage in any way, shape or form. So when I went to work at Jordan, I mean, that was like, that was such fun because Eddie was always up for some kind of PR stunt. We used to joke, myself and Ian Phillips, who was the commercial director, is like, does Eddie want to be rich today or does he want to be famous today? Because those were his two favourite things in life. So who's going to have a busy day today, me or you?
He seems like such a great character.
Oh, I'm so fond of EJ. Yeah.
And you touched on it just then. I know I'm diverting slightly from this. But being a woman in such a male-dominated industry, it's slightly less now, but it's still, massively saturated by men.
Yes.
A bit of advice for women trying to get into the sport, be it driver, pundit, whatever they want to be, journalist, creating their own content. A bit of advice for them as to what that was like going into it then. I know it's better now, but what was that like for you?
Now. I didn't think it was bad. I didn't have, personally, aside from the fact that, yes, okay, you knew that blokes were going, oh, check out, there's a bird over there.
And in
normal,
fact,
it was, we're talking a couple of decades ago, so that kind of banter was a bit more normal in those days.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at, and I've said this to a few people, if you look at all of the girls who were working the sport then, I've always said, I'm 5'10", I'm bossy, I can hold my own. I think if you look at all the girls who were working in the sport then, we were all quite strong characters. We all had that, like, don't even think about being with me, look about us. Do you know what I mean? So people didn't. So, and I did have, I was quite contained when I first used to go to the races with Leighton House, just to let people know, listen, don't even think about it because I'm here to work. I'm not going to, be standoffish or anything, but don't even think about trying it on kind of thing. So once I'd established that, jobs are good. And, I was just another work colleague. So that's always been the way that it's been for me. But as I say, I think that's partly down to the fact I'm tall and quite happy to stand up for myself.
So you reckon you've got to be quite a tough-nosed, tough-skinned?
I think you did
like
then.
It, yeah.
I think you did then, yes.
Less so now?
Well, I think because, the kind of, the banter in inverted commas, that at the time, it was taken as banter. It was normal. Nowadays, some of that banter, you can't, it's not acceptable anymore. And rightly so in many ways.
Yeah.
Things like, I used to do things like, you'd walk down into the race shop then at Jordan. And, it's full of girly calendars everywhere. So myself and a couple of the girls that I work with, we got a Chippendales calendar and we stuck the pictures of the blokes with their tops off and, not wearing much all around. The guys were like, whoa, I don't know. It's like, well, hello. We don't want those tits there either. So let's just all take them down, shall we? And it was,
fair enough.
So, do you know what I mean? So that was the way that we went about it, basically.
That's a really fun way about it.
Yeah, it's like a statement without saying
exactly. I don't think you need to be confrontational, but it's just, and I think that's still, God, we're getting quite deep here, aren't we? But that is still, there are times when I've had to say to colleagues, mate, you can't do that. You can't say that kind of stuff. So because we live in a different era.
You've never faced any, like, something something that's happened or some kind of situation, experience, a remark someone said to you that you really thought was out of order or might have put you off it?
There have been 2 occasions I remember when Tony, my original boss, first said to Ian Phillips, who was going to be my boss at Leighton House, which was the first team I was going to go travelling with. I've got this girl, she's going to come. And Ian said, no, don't want to go. No. Tony said, well, she's quite good. No, don't want to go. It'll be a disruptive on the team and blah, blah, blah. And anyway, I turned up. Ian is still a mate now. And it was a long time before Ian ever employed a male press officer, because I think, there were times I'm trying to get 2 blokes. It was 2 drivers. It was Ivan Capelli and Mauricio Gugelmin were the 2 drivers at Leighton House at the time. And I think I could say to them, there is everybody goes about their job in a different way, but as males and females, we might be doing the same job, but we all bring a different dynamic to it in the same way that 2 blokes bring a different dynamic to it. And I just think it was much easier for me as a girl to go, come on, guys, come do this for me now. Whereas a bloke would find it a bit more difficult. So they'd kind of go, oh, God, all right. And so, I think at times, in some ways, being a female, trying to get blokes to do things they didn't want to do, it was easier for me.
I think, because I think just as a guy, when you're told to do something by a bloke, sometimes you have a bit of an ego battle or something with them. Whereas if you're told what to do
battles?
Yeah, I know, in motorsport, no way. I know, but actually reflecting on that, when you are told what to do or to do something for a woman, you're way more likely to do it as a guy. I think.
To be quite blunt, I think they found it more difficult to tell me to F off.
Yeah, true.
So, yeah.
And then with the press, were you actually interviewing drivers back then as well, being a press officer? You weren't?
No.
When did that come about?
That came about literally when, I was interviewing them in terms of like asking them, getting a quote from them for the team press release.
Right.
But no, I'd never done any interviewing. That came about when ITV said, there you go, here's a microphone, off you go.
Oh, so you were in the deep end again.
I was right in the deep end again. Yeah. So when ITV took over the coverage of F1 from the BBC, there were a number of different production companies that were bidding to actually make the programs for ITV, and I was approached by one of those production companies, Mac One. So there were a few key people there. There was James Allen, who I knew because he had also been a press officer for the Brabham team, so I knew James from there. And there was a guy called Kevin Piper who worked at Anglia TV. Now Jordan were based just up the road at Silverstone. So we were in the Anglia patch. So Kevin was the head of sport there. So he used to come down, and I knew him. He'd come down, and whenever we had anything going on at Jordan, he'd be the local reporter who came down to cover it. So and those 2 guys were involved in the bid. So they suggested me as that they wanted to have a female just to represent the fact there were a lot of women who were interested in motorsport. And I guess there were 2 ways they went about it. They either took somebody who knew about television and taught them about Formula One, or they took somebody who knew about Formula One and taught them about television. And luckily for me, they decided to go that second route. But yeah, early doors, it literally was. I remember going down and sitting in a pub in London with James and saying, so how do you do this job? And he was like, well, you just don't ask an open question the whole time, so that you make them. So don't ever ask a question that they can say yes or no to. So don't say was this good, was this bad. It was tell me about. And then we filmed. We had to secretly, actually, I was at a test in, I think it was Estoril, and Jordan obviously didn't know that I was talking to these guys about potentially going to work for them. So, and they needed to film me doing something. So we had to secretly film me up on the roof, like filming a piece about pit stops, and which we would try. So I can still remember, it's like, I was looking down the pit lane, the car came down, did a practice pit stop, and I looked at camera, pit stops, and off I go into my, and then we got to the first race, which was in Melbourne, and they just kind of went, there you go, there's a microphone, off you go. I was terrified, absolutely terrified, but I knew everybody, and all the drivers were great. They knew. At this point, you've built relationships
with other people.
I'd been working in the paddock for years at this point, so all the drivers were, particularly the British drivers, I knew all of them, so they were like, God, you're really nervous, aren't you? I was like, yes, I am. Yeah, so they were all like really gentle with me and really helpful. And
so when you are interviewing drivers, you did interview some Formula One drivers along your career, right? in Formula One.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does he know what I've done?
Yeah.
Jordan giving him that like, what
That's what
this
this
is
is.
about there?
No, but you.
Yes.
Yeah.
You talked
Yes,
about
darling.
at the start you weren't.
No,
I'm just trying to
as
clarify.
a press officer I wasn't, and then when I started working for ITV as a pit lane reporter, that was my job basically, was interviewing the drivers.
Okay, and could you give me a bit of an insight as to when you go in for these, say it's like post-race, like they do in the media pen now.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what it was like. Was it similar back then?
No, we instigated the media pen actually because it was chaos. We just used to all charge at the drivers and try.
Oh,
and
so you
get
all
hold
just
of them.
went for them straight away?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay.
it was actually myself, James, a Japanese broadcaster, said, "Listen, this ain't working. Let's set something up whereby you bring the drivers to us." And anyway, I digress.
So with that, do you have like prepare? I know you can't prepare as the race has gone on and whatever, but do you walk into this with like a set kind of structure of questions, or are you just straight off the cuff?
No, you watch the race. So, and you work out what is the story of that race and what are the key things to ask that driver about his, as it would be in Formula One, his story in that race. So I would be there making notes. I used to have, everybody has their own system, but I would have like a bit of paper and I would have like each driver's name or initials, and then I'd scribble notes depending on what was happening to that particular driver throughout the race. So,
okay.
I
and
saw
then
this, yeah.
when it got to the end of the race, it was like, driver comes up, oh God, right, what happened to Jacques Villeneuve? Oh God, oh yeah, that, oh bad start, oh yeah, right. So Jacques, tell me about your bad start, kind of thing. So,
You'd easily forget it, right?
That
Because
must
like
be-
I remember working at Silverstone last year. When the races started, we went straight into McLaren hospitality just to watch the race.
Yeah.
And Natalie Pinkham, Naomi Schiff, they were sat
you'd be
down. They
sitting there
weren't
making
talking
notes.
to each other.
No,
They were
you're
just
watching.
note taking.
Yeah.
Every single thing that happened, note.
Yeah.
Didn't even talk, just watched it. And
Yeah.
so that after they know exactly, like you just said, you know exactly what to say. But on that note as well, with under the umbrella of ITV, how many of the questions are almost from you, or are ITV also mentioning we need to ask this, or do they have the full trust in you to ask?
I mean, that's
what
your
you
job.
need?
It's like, you know, if you've got somebody hanging over your shoulder the whole time you're doing your job,
Right.
you're in the wrong job, basically. So,
That's
no,
good.
they
Gives
would.
you the freedom.
Yeah. I mean, they might occasionally. So, occasionally, it's. I'm just thinking about, obviously when I'm working with ITV now at touring car races, I might occasionally when I'm doing my grid walk or when I'm doing my post-race interviews, I've got my earpieces in. So I can hear the show, but B, I can hear the production talk back. So I'll have the producer, the director, I can hear them talking. It tends to be prompted by the commentators, bless them. And at times you want to go, Tim, David, I was watching the same bloody race as you, but there'll be something that they really want to know.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to their commentary. I'm picking up on what they're saying as well, because that gives me insight as to, particularly from a technical perspective, because obviously somebody like Tim Harvey's got a lot more technical knowledge than me. So he'll be saying, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what's happening there. I'll make a note of that. And I'll ask the driver. But there are occasions when, to answer your question, somebody will say, can you ask the driver X, Y, Z? And that's, as I say, that's generally Tim saying, tell Louise, he's got his finger on the button, tell Louise to ask him this. So
How do you concentrate while that's
you
happening?
just learn to phase in and out the information that you need to listen to and the bits you don't listen to. It's most difficult when I'm doing a grid walk because I've also got the director saying, like camera 2, can you pan in on this? And so they're talking to the cameramen at times. I've got the PA who is the person who's saying 2 minutes to the break, 1 minute to the break. So you've got to be aware of the timings to know how much more time. And then I'll have the director who will also be keeping across. So we'll have had the conversation beforehand about okay, who am I going to interview? These I think are the stories. These are the people I think I need to chat to for my grid walk for the next race. So I'll have a chat with the series editor and he'll go, yep, agree with you there. Or, oh, how about that? And you think, oh gosh, yeah, sorry, I missed that one. Let's have a word with him. So I've worked out what my plan of attack is. And then he will also be saying, right, move on to the next car, which helps me keep across how much time I've had and how much more time I've got before I have to end my grid walk. That's the theory anyway, but it's live television. It doesn't always go to plan.
No, it's not.
Something will happen, you'll lose the sound, I've also got a floor manager with me, so there'll be hand gestures going on as well, like things like this, which means like break.
Oh, like this, you're going to a commercial break.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, there'll be hand gestures as well, just in case.
With that, it must be so easy to make mistakes, right? So have you give me an idea, and the viewers an idea of what the pressure, I know you're used to it now, but the pressure of constantly being on live television, so you can't make any F-ups because you can't swear, you can't whatever, like we can.
We'd be finished straight away.
Yeah, we would be done, mate. We'd be cancelled.
Honestly, do you know what? Well, on that subject, I was chatting to somebody recently. I'd done a podcast with them, and they said, "Oh yeah, you got the record for the most swearing." It's like, oh shit, they're all gone. Because I do that. That's one thing I have found actually working in a male-dominated environment. I've got the gob of a navvy on me.
But it's like you see it with like Yuki Tsunoda. He grew up in racing in the UK with UK mechanics, and that's why his language is just
the whole time.
Yeah, his English wasn't great, especially when he got into F1. But all it was fuck this, fuck that shit. I
can remember having that with Ralph
funny.
Schumacher as well. Ralph Schumacher swearing doing an interview with me, and I'm like, he went, what do you mean I cannot do this? Everybody does this. It's like, I know they do it in the garage, but you can't do it on television. You can't do it.
Yeah.
And there's something in the back of your brain that stops you swearing, I think, when you're on television. But when it comes to making mistakes, I mean, I'm notoriously bad at names. I could forget both of your names, and I've known you both for years, so that I just call everybody
It
darling.
must be difficult
it's really useful.
you're dealing with so many drivers all the time. Like on ITV weekends, you must be, and it's not always the same three on the podium as well.
No,
like you've got to know all the
what,
Porsche
the drivers
drivers'
are the
names.
easy ones because they've normally got the names written on the belts or somewhere or on the car.
But
or
usually
something
last
like that.
names, right?
It's but then you
Mr.
can.
Burton. Yeah.
So if you want to become a racing driver like some of our lovely guests and you're not really sure how to start because it seems like you need a lot of money and family connections that know the industry, etc. Well, now you have the perfect opportunity to prove you have what it takes on a completely level playing field. That's why we've created Forsetti. Forsetti is an online platform that guides you on how to start your racing driver journey and helps you develop your skills to climb up the ladder. We host time attacks every single week, and if you're the fastest driver, we put you straight into a car and integrate you in an established esports team racing against some of the best talent in the world. So if you think you're the best thing since sliced bread and you have what it takes, make sure to sign up at forsettirace.com. Link is also in the description. Back to the podcast.
Have you had any moments where you've really thought, oh God, like I've really fucked up?
No, not really. I've had a few. I can remember actually back in the early days, I had a couple of moments where I just had an absolute blank. So I can remember being at Monaco one year and they said, right, we're going to come down to you. You're going to do a piece to camera, live piece to camera. And you're just going to be standing at harbour side and talk about the atmosphere. And so, and I used to, I'm quite I'm not very spontaneous, so I prepare everything. It's my way of, I can be spontaneous off the back of having done a load of prep. I get really, really pissed off with people like Jade Edwards who just swan in, seemingly having done no notes, no nothing, and absolutely smash it. It's, I'm joking. She's bloody brilliant. So
I think being able to give a driver's, but like when you know exactly, like when you're watching. For instance, I think if someone was to ask me about a race that had just happened and you can give a driver's perspective, you really know and have confidence in what you're talking about.
Well, because I've been around long enough and I know the sport and I'm paying attention and I'm watching and I'm interested in the sport. So, you see people coming along who are just asking stupid questions and you just kind of think, well, you're not watching that race. Or imagine, put yourself on the other side of it. You've just had a really shitty race and someone's come along and said, oh, you didn't do very well there, did you? How are you, what's the person how are they supposed to respond? So I think you've got to have an empathy for the people that you're talking to. Yes, you've got to I've got to ask the question. And if you've had a shitty race, I can't say, oh, poor you.
Yeah.
But it's the way that you ask these things. I used to have these conversations with Ted, my telly hubby, Ted Kravitz, back in the day. Ted was very much an eager beaver. Still is, isn't he? Really?
Yeah,
and
so good.
getting in there, and there were times when Ted said, "Oh, you should have." Just like, mate, I do it my day. And there was one occasion when I can't remember exactly who it was, but I got something out of the driver just because and it was almost, I knew he'd made a huge mistake. But the way that I asked my question, it was almost like, was there a problem with the car? Not quite like that.
Right.
But it was like, and you could see him thinking, I've either got to throw the team under the bus here, I've got to fess up to the fact that I made a mistake. So he went, no, the car was fine, I made a mistake, you know.
Yeah.
And I think through that, Ted kind of saw that, oh, actually there are several ways to skin a rabbit, aren't there? You know,
Yeah.
sometimes if you come, so I've always worked on the basis of asking a sensible question, but building relationships with the people that I'm working with, or trying to build, you know, I can't be everybody's best mate. You know, as you say, when I'm working at the touring car race, there's the F4s, there's the minis, so I can't know everybody. But I think, you know, hopefully having a rapport with the people that you're working with, and the drivers knowing that you understand the sport, and that if you do ask them a tough question, it comes from the right place, then you build up a respectful working relationship. And that's what it's all about. People are going to tell you more stuff if they've got a relationship with you and they trust you. And
absolutely. And on that topic, who have been your favourite drivers to look at? It's unfair to pick one person.
Well, I couldn't pick one, to be honest, because
I suppose there's two different eras here. There's Formula One and then obviously touring cars. But who have you? Is there a group of drivers you particularly really enjoyed interviewing after the race that you have that great relationship with?
Especially in F1.
I think, you know, people who were watching in the time will probably DC would be somebody you pick out, because DC and I just had like so much banter over the years.
He seems very genuine.
I saw an interview.
Yeah, I know where you're going with this one.
And I was going to send it to you.
Oh God,
the Canada interview.
Yeah.
I made the huge mistake. DC had screwed up. He'd messed up with the pit lane speed limiter. He'd got a penalty for speeding in the pit lane and failed to get what would have been the team's first podium finish as a result. I made the mistake of priming him at the next Grand Prix that I was going to talk to him about it, because DC could be he was one of those people who could get a bit upset if you asked the question in the wrong way. So I said, I'm just going to ask about it. So big mistake, because that meant DC had an opportunity to come up with an answer. So basically when I said, oh mate, you know, problem at the last race, you know, with the pit lane speed I had, kind of a bit joking, have you been practicing it? And he went, yeah, I've been pretending it's your nipple and caressing it gently.
He said this on TV. What? I don't know. I was about to say that.
Yes.
You've been practicing with that pit lane speed limiter?
Yeah, I have. I've just been imagining it's your nipple, so I'm being a bit more gentle with it when I take my finger off it at the end of the pit lane.
Thank you very much, David. Back to you.
Yes, yeah, thanks very much indeed for that one, David. That's fantastic.
I was going to send it to you. I don't know why I didn't, but it really caught me off guard.
Maybe if you said that now, you'd be cancelled.
Well, absolutely, you'd be cancelled. And all I could hear in my headphones was the entire gallery, which is all the production people, pissing themselves laughing. I kind of went, like, you know, 5 minutes later, you thought of 101 witty things to come back with. At the time, I just like, oh, thank you, DC. Then it cut back to Jim Rowe.
What do you say?
Back to you, Ted.
Back to the studio.
You could see Tony Jardine, like, you know, it was just. But the funny thing was that was two mates mucking about.
Yeah, of course.
I had people saying, "Oh my God, you must be so upset." It's like, "Oh, really? Get a life." That DC was just mucking about, you know.
Do you have that attitude?
We were on page 3, for God's sake, in the Sun.
Do you have that attitude, like when they throw a bit of banter and it's like, I think it's clear cut. Like we've even seen, I'm not going to comment on it because I don't know much about it, but with this MasterChef guy recently, one of the presenters, have you heard about it? I've forgotten his name, but he's been basically thrown under the bus for comments or maybe jokes we don't know, a bit of a grey area. I think there's a clear cut. I'm not saying we should all make jokes like that necessarily to women, especially when you're in a live interview, but I think there's such a clear cut, like, whether you're making a joke and it's clearly just to throw you off guard or something, and whether it's creepy and weird.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, that's the thing, though. I don't think it is clear cut, and it depends who does it. So, you know, I had a funny incident with Johnny Herbert as well, which, you know, in this day and age, we would both have been in so much trouble for it. Basically, grabbing at each other's, you know, anatomy, just mucking about. Johnny used to do it off camera, trying to put me off. He'd be like poking me in the side just when ITV's about to come down live to me, and this kind of carried on, and so we were just mucking about. And I won't go into the full detail of it because you know, we absolutely. Johnny would have been in so much, well, and so would I, because I reciprocated afterwards just to get him back. But I think the thing is that, you know, the difference there was that was two consenting adults, for want of a better phrase. You know what I mean? Two good mates mucking about, having a laugh. Yeah. But there are other people who've tried to do that with me, and I've had to say, don't ever
because you don't know them.
Do that to me again.
Yeah.
This is not yours to be touching, so get your blood. Do you know what I mean? So the circumstances are always different, aren't they? So
I think older men I say older men, like, who were sort of maybe like working at the same time, say in Formula One as you, who have they're now in the modern age of working in TV, whatever it is. You see, again, with
just a joke.
with
It's
this
like,
MasterChef, yeah, but it's like I think they really struggle with that transition. It's like they can't. I've had a blank here.
That's all right.
They can't like transition their jokes and their inappropriateness towards women, or even if it's racial, whatever, like stuff that was okay 20 years ago, they'll still be saying today.
Yeah.
I think as comedians are probably in a tricky spot at the moment, right?
It was
Because
okay.
it's like, that's
But
what I
you
mean.
have to be edgy to be a comedian, right?
That's
but,
what I mean. Yeah, that's so.
But I
it
think
was okay 20 years ago to have calendars with girls with no clothes on up on the walls in a business environment.
True, yeah.
It's not.
But my point is,
I say it was okay. It wasn't okay, but it was deemed to be okay. Listen, one of the biggest selling national newspapers, had a page 3 girl with a top off, didn't it? So
yeah,
It
I
doesn't
think
exist still, does it?
no.
don't-
I think
Don't think so.
a better way to put it was, I think some people in the modern age are confused as to what they can. When I say people, I mean men.
Yeah.
They're confused as to what they can and can't say to women.
yeah.
And it's also, God, you put me on the spot there, Louise. I thought you were going to come back with something. I feel like I'm in that.
You're looking really nervous.
I'm-
You know what?
I'm
we
really
were
on
nervous
edge
for
now.
today because, like roles are reversed.
Roles are reversed.
Well, and part of me thinks unlucky.
Yeah.
Welcome to our world.
Louise is like, good luck, you
Yeah,
two.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I do have sympathy, but there is that also part of me. It's it's like when people say, "Oh, it's all so biased towards girls." It's like, well, it's about bloody time we had a bit of bias, because you don't realise how much it's been biased towards you lot, for so many years. So get over yourselves.
But I think it's much easier. Would you agree that it's much easier now as a woman to get into the sport in general?
I
and-
would
and to
like
be propelled
think
to the front of
it's
it.
easier as a woman, as a gay or
Yeah.
lesbian, as somebody of a different ethnic background to get into the sport.
I got a job for it. I got a job for being mixed race on
Did
there.
you?
So
Yeah.
it's all right.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's right,
yeah.
but
It's
Yeah,
not
but-
a bad time to be black or female,
Yeah,
basically, is
yeah.
it? So, but you'll
Yeah.
probably agree with me here, Jordan. It's like, well, it's about bloody time the roles were reversed, and we actually had a little bit of
Yeah.
positive bias because it's been so much against us for so long.
well,
so.
yeah. I mean, I won't get into it, but it's like one of those
Get
where
into
you
it,
don't.
we can take it out.
Yeah,
of it.
as in, it's not nice. I don't like it when you just get a job based on
No,
where you're from. It's you got to have some sort of
Should
I
just be
don't
the
like-
best person for the job.
Yeah, this
right?
is what I get frustrated with. I don't like when a brand or something promotes a poster boy for being, for the color of their skin.
This
you know
is
what
an
I mean?
interesting one. What do you think of Jaguar now and their new market? Have you seen their new ad?
No, I've been away. I've been. I was away working in Vegas, and then I had a couple of weeks holiday. So I've seen a little bit of it, but I haven't seen.
Well, they're getting so much shame for being this woke brand
Yeah.
because they've gone from
out
their
of nowhere.
current
They've totally
their
changed the
audience
logo,
before,
haven't they? And
brand before,
Yeah.
and it's tailored towards a certain type of audience, and then now they've gone for this completely new modern sort of look and feel, and this group are getting annoyed because it's looked at as woke, right?
yeah,
But I think the problem is, like, the advert had no car in it. It was just many diverse characters wearing ridiculous outfits, basically, and I couldn't really get a grasp of what the advert was. But I think their whole customer base, if you think of who Jag owners are,
Yeah.
they're not going to like that kind of thing, are they? And
maybe
I know
they want a
that,
new customer base.
Yeah,
and you're
but-
all talking about it.
Which is risky.
yeah, true. We are talking about it, but I'm talking about it in the sense that now I don't really want to go and buy a Jaguar, to be honest. Not that I can afford one, but but yeah. Anyway, shall we come back to?
Yeah, we'll come back.
shall we
We'll
come
forget about that sort of topic.
Coming back to Formula One, or just being a pundit in general. Do you have drivers? We talked about kind of favourite and least favourite. Were there drivers that you interviewed that were on camera super nice, well media trained and whatever, and off camera they're a completely different person?
Do you know all drivers can be an arse when they've had a bad day?
True, I agree.
That's understandable, you know.
Yeah.
So and So you just have to learn not to take it personally. If
Yeah.
the driver's getting shitty, they're not shitty with me. They're just shitty with the world and probably pissed off at themselves.
course,
So it's not personal. And actually, sometimes not saying anything and stomping off says everything, doesn't it? So,
Yeah.
you know, my job as a reporter is to kind of reflect, trying to elicit, generally speaking, words, but sometimes it can just be the emotions of, you know, what's been happening. So there were, I mean, we were saying, like, which drivers did I like doing interviews with? Well, the ones that I got on well with and the ones that gave me something back. But even them, every now and then, like somebody you think is like a really nice guy and you get really chatty with will be really short with you and you think, okay, all right, that's my card marked or whatever. But as I say, you just have to learn to let it go.
And did you ever have to ask questions to a driver that you really didn't want to ask, but you had to for the story?
Yeah, God, yes. Yeah, when you can tell a driver's absolutely distraught at something, and you've got to, you know, because they've just made a huge mistake and thrown something away, and they're absolutely distraught about it, and you've got to say, well, you made a huge mistake there and threw something away, didn't you? Effectively, I mean, hopefully you do it in a slightly nicer way, but that's the job. You know, you can't sugarcoat. I'm not in charge of what happened with their result. I'm just there to elicit a response to it for the audience and hopefully ask the question at home that the audience wants to hear the answer to.
Do you think as well with drivers in these interviews, I've heard of, we had Enzo on, who's a coach of Ollie Behrman and Liam Lawson, and he's had obviously that insight. He does lots of things with lots of drivers. Obviously, they've gone for Formula One tests and had their FP1s, and obviously Liam and Ollie have done Formula One races and will probably be in F1 next year. Ollie definitely, Liam maybe. But why do I keep blanking? You're making me nervous, Louise. But yeah, with them, he said
I've still got it.
you still have it.
he said they'll have like a perfect interview where they've said absolutely nothing wrong. They've just praised the team and they've said, you know, very vanilla interview. And they'll still get pulled aside afterwards and be like, this was wrong, that was wrong, that was wrong. Do you think that the drivers are too restrained and they're not allowed to show their personality?
I'll often say, as you both know, I do a lot of media training these days. So I'm working with a lot of drivers. I'm working with a lot of the F1 teams with their academy drivers. And as I always say to them, first and foremost, as a reporter, as a fan, the last thing I want is some bland, dull PR machine in front of my microphone. That's no fun for anybody. And I do, you know, feel for the drivers because everything that they say is absolutely picked up, and even the slightest thing can get taken out of context and it can get reported. And the drivers, that's what the teams are trying to do, is when you bear in mind that they've got a lot of brands that they're involved with, and some of it will come down to those brands that they're involved with. So you look at Red Bull, and they basically sell fizzy pop that people drink at parties. Do you know what I mean? So, and obviously they have other brands that they're involved with, but the bottom line is that, you know, a Red Bull driver has always been able to be a lot more free.
See it with Max.
With what they're saying. You see it, Max, and you see it. I tell you where that and DC was the man who first talked, because DC had gone from McLaren. DC came up through the Jackie Stewart school of, you know, Stewart Grand Prix, or sorry, Stewart, Paul Stewart racing in his early days. And Jackie was very, because he'd worked with brands and was very like what you can say, what you can't say, etc. Then DC was at McLaren, which was very corporate, very, very corporate. And DC said every time he opened his mouth, he was thinking about what will Mobil think, what will McLaren think, what will so-and-so think, what will... Then he gets to Red Bull and they basically said, mate, say what you like, just don't slag off the drink, you know? So that was like, whoa, God, can I do that? So then suddenly he could be himself.
Yeah.
And the person, people used to say to me, it was a bit boring, DC. And he's like, no, you have no idea what DC's like. But then he could be more himself because he didn't have to just edit himself the whole time. So sometimes drivers, they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. You know, if they run the risk if they do say something and it's taken out of context, then, you know, and they're showing a bit of personality, it's taken out of context, then they're in trouble. If they don't say anything, then they just need to be boring. So, and you see this so much with the younger drivers coming up through the ranks, the F3 drivers, the F2 drivers. Most of the work I'm doing with them is just like, talk, mate, honestly, stop, because they're just all so concerned about saying the wrong thing. And we've seen it with some drivers that they lose their careers because a throwaway comment when they're, you know, when they're on the sims, when they're, you know, racing with mates online, a throwaway comment is taken out of context context, and that's it.
Yeah.
But do you
they've
agree
lost
that
the
that's
gig, though.
ridiculous?
It's the world we live in. Whether I agree that it's ridiculous or not, it's not going to change it, is it? You know, it's the culture that we live in. So it's just about navigating that basically for them, really.
It's tricky because to create a buzz around someone, like to get sponsors, you need to be some kind of personality almost in a way with your content that you're pumping out. So if your drivers are always careful what they say, so don't have the freedom to do, you know, really cool stuff or crazy stuff that gains that traction to attract sponsors. So it feels like, you know, drivers coming up, we've seen it with drivers that come on here, almost have to be in this, restraint sort of
what's nice about
with what they're talking about.
What's nice about a podcast though is that you can't hide behind, like, we've had some drivers on for the first, say, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And they're
really
PR mode.
Yeah.
Whether they're media trained or not, they'll either be closed and nervous for the first 10 minutes or
Can
they'll...
I just say, media trained means having the confidence to get your personality across because you're in control of your environment. It doesn't mean my version of media training.
Okay.
It's like, don't get yourself into this where you can say stuff, you can have your personality because you know you're in control. You're in the driving seat of the interview.
Interesting. It's an interesting view on it, actually.
That's my version of media training. So just to cut you in there,
You make me
because a
feel
lot
out
of people
control.
think media trained is like boring and bland and not saying anything. I don't.
That is
That's
my
the last
perception.
thing I want on the end of my microphone. Is
Yeah.
boring, bland, and not saying anything. That's just boring and bland.
Back to, so I wanted to talk about your touring car experience
Yes.
actually as well. So we always have drivers on that talk about their struggles with gaining sponsorship every single winter. How does someone like a touring car driver, it costs, say, £600,000 to get on the grid. How does one go about gaining that sort of funding every single year, every winter?
Through a lot of really hard work. That's the job. If you ask any racing driver, that's the main part of their job.
90% of it.
Yeah, so this piece that we did with ITV, I can remember Jack Goff saying that, like, I spend the whole week, LinkedIn is my best friend. I'm going through LinkedIn, I'm getting contacts, I'm following up on them, and, you know, out of every 100 contacts, like, you
One
know,
will bite.
10 respond, and if one of those does it, that is the job. So much of, you know, that's why, the drivers, your be all and end all is getting involved with the manufacturer in some way, shape or form, isn't it? Because that's basically going to pay your wages. Or, you know, the model with GTs whereby you've got a kind of patron, as it were, a rich driver and a young hotshot driver. The rich one pays for the young hotshot to go racing, and so the budgets for I can remember actually having the conversation again years ago with it was with Kelvin Burt, who you guys will know, but who's an old mate of mine. Kelvin was our test driver at Jordan back in the day, and when ITV pulled out of Formula One, I was like, oh God, I don't know what I'm going to do next. And he went, yeah. It was like, there was no sympathy, and I kind of thought, okay, that's been your entire working career, hasn't it? Not knowing what you're going to be doing next year as a racing driver, because that's just the way that it works, isn't it? Am I going to be racing? Am I going to have the budget? Am I going to be able to do what I do?
Yeah.
People are always shocked when I explain that to them.
Yeah.
Like, especially when they see me, like, they think I've really hit the pinnacle of my career when I raced in Porsche Super Cup last year.
Yeah.
And it's like, it must be so amazing you're racing at these. I'm like, yeah, it is amazing racing at these cool events on the Formula One weekend at Monaco, whatever. But I'm like, I'm just constantly, like, at the end of that year, I had my title sponsor who was doing just shy of 300,000 euros, right? Somehow managed to land them just before the season and sign the contract. They had a deal where they basically paid the first big lump, and then for the last two races they had another, I think it was 80,000 or whatever installment, and they pulled out because their business started going downhill.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, then I'm like, shit, what am I going to do?
I've got a contract that says I'm going to provide all that money.
Yeah, and I've got a
To the
contract also, not only with that sponsor.
No, but that's what I mean with the team. I'm committed to giving that money.
You pull out, and then I've also got contracts with other sponsors that say I'm doing the full season, so I can't pull out now. So it's like, what do I do? Do I take a loan out? Like, Dad, have you got some money you can give me? Do you know what?
No, you had all of that in your junior racing career, son.
And that was the verdict from him as well, which I completely understand. So I was, literally then smashing mid-season, right at the end of the season, just smashing the phones. Hi, anyone who knows anyone? I was calling, going, do you know anyone that would want to get involved in Formula One? Come to a couple of the races. I was trying to get, I think, 4 people or 3 people for 25 grand or something for the end of the year, and it's so stressful.
Yeah.
And then you get to the off season. I started this year. I had again, these are big figures in it to the average person, but in motorsport it's quite normal. I had a sponsor for $250,000. It was all done, whatever. I hadn't signed a contract, but actually, weirdly, quite a lot of deals, by the way, in motorsport aren't contractual. Yeah. We hit February, and one of them he pulled out, and then another one pulled out, and all of a sudden I'd gone from having about 400,000 budget to 0.
Yeah.
And then I went to race in America, and the title sponsor for that was supposed to be OnlyFans, and I was there for free on a performance basis. And
the only thing you had to do was create an account.
Yeah. After genuinely, they wanted us because OnlyFans wanted to be more professional. They wanted to be what they first set out to be, right? They wanted racing drivers to create accounts and post exclusive content, not of our private parts, but of our racing. And anyway, Porsche or F1, can't remember which, turned around after the second weekend, after I was second in the championship, turned around and said, we can't have that on the car. And then the team boss called me and said, look, I need X amount per weekend now from me. And I can't do it.
I haven't got it, yeah.
So that's a little insight as to, and that's just me and Porsches. You want to do FIA F3, F2,
you're talking
millions and millions and millions.
Yeah.
And you can't do like my opinion on Formula 3 and Formula 2, unless you come from a certain country or something where there's a small population and it's quite wealthy, or like Kush said, our friend Kush Maini from obviously Indian, he said the whole country's behind him, and any wealthy businessman there wants to see a driver in Formula One.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're British, we've got loads of drivers who care, and loads of drivers that can afford to do it. So it is a problem.
It's been a big change I've seen in the years that I've been doing media training, which I basically started doing that when ITV pulled out of the F1. So I've been doing it for 20 years now. And when I first started doing that, you speak to all of the drivers. What do you want to do? I want to be in Formula One. Nowadays, you talk to a young 14, 15-year-old, and they basically there was that change when the aspiration. Of course, every 14-year-old who's Carter would still love to be in Formula One, but realistically, they're like, I want to race in the British Touring Car. So you look at Jake Hill, who's won the British Touring Car. That's all he ever wanted to do was race in the British Touring Car Championship. Ash Sutton. That was his goal. Tom Ingram, their goal was to race in the British Touring Car Championship, because they knew that where they were coming from, the backgrounds that they were coming from, they were never, ever going to have the budget. So it was that time when it changed. One of the first drivers I worked with at Jordan was Eddie Irvine. Eddie didn't sit in a racing car till he was 17 years old. And a few years later, he's racing in Formula One.
Same with Damon Hill.
Yeah. Would not happen. Damon was busy racing bikes until so that just would not happen nowadays. So and I and again, when I'm doing my media training, a lot of drivers will say, oh, Kimi Räikkönen, he doesn't. It's like, but Kimi did one season in single seaters before he went in. He did a season of Formula Renault, then he was in Formula One. That ain't going to happen anymore. So and if you want to come up through the ranks, which you're going to have to do, you're going to have to do F4. That's going to be what's the season of F4?
Well,
and the rest, I'd say.
Yeah, so
Enzo said it can be $1 million.
Yeah,
with management fees.
By the time you've done, the Middle Eastern series is your warm up.
Yeah.
To the start of the season, and then you're doing that. It's huge budget. Then you've got to do FRECA, then you've got to do F3. That it's just, even if you're doing the sort of GB4 route, or it's just huge amounts of money.
Yeah, and on the topic of sponsorship, so one of the best opportunities at the moment we see is Formula One Academy, right? In terms of the support that the girls are getting and the exposure. Honestly, Louise, we've had all sorts of comments on it, so many controversial,
mixed.
People say it's unfair, all this, as you'd imagine.
Some slightly more edgy ones as well.
Slightly more edgy, yeah, honestly. So how important do you feel F1 Academy is moving forwards?
I used to rally, not at a terribly high level, but, and I was utterly dismissive of the fastest female rally driver prize. I'd quite happily take the check that went with it, but we're talking about budgets. I take them. For me, I'm competitive. I don't want to be the fastest driver with tits, as I used to call it. I just want to be the fastest driver. Do you know what I mean? So I instinctively am not a fan of single-sex series. I've always applauded the fact that I think it's motor racing, equestrian, sailing, the three sports where men and women can truly compete on equal footing. But we have seen evidentially, if you look at the number of girls, I speak to so many youngsters. How did you get started in racing? Oh, well, I went to a birthday party and we went karting. How many people take their 10-year-old daughter karting for their 10th birthday party? So because there is this perception that motorsport is for boys, it's for men, it's not for women. So whilst I am wholeheartedly a fan of both sexes competing equally against each other, so instinctively don't particularly like the all women, be it F1 Academy or whatever it might be, I 100% applaud the visibility that it has given. Because in the same way that I've had so many girls say to me over the years, oh my God, I never knew I could be a reporter in Formula One until I saw you as a girl doing that job. So no, it made me think, oh God, really does that? But that visibility does make a difference, a massive difference. You speak to Susie Wolff when she set up Dare to Be Different. That was all about the visibility. So I really love the fact that now young 10-year-old girls can say, oh, I can go karting. Oh, it's like it's the same. Young 10-year-old girls can say, oh, girls can play football. Oh, I didn't know that. Because I looked out there and I couldn't see any girls, any women playing football. I looked on the Formula One grid and all I saw the women doing was like holding an umbrella and wearing a short skirt. I never saw them in the cars. So I 100% applaud that visibility. And also it has opened up the commercial world's eyes to the fact that actually, and this has been a problem with female sport throughout, if you look at it, that, because sport involves like sweating and beating people and what would be traditionally seen to be male attributes, being competitive, wanting to beat somebody, wanting to win, there, when you look at the sort of the female sponsors in any kind of sport, they just weren't there. So, but again, be it with football, be it with rugby, be it with whatever, because there is now more visibility for women's sport. It's now more aspirational for girls to get into those sports. It's now more normal for those girls to be in those sports. Therefore, the money will then follow because it's like, okay, this is quite cool now. So actually, yes, Charlotte Tilbury wants its makeup to be seen on the side of a racing car because, hey, that's quite cool, isn't it? So that's good.
Yeah.
Do you not? So I agree with that to an extent.
There's a but coming, isn't there?
Yeah, but do you not think that there's a difference biologically with interest in the sport for reasons that we're just wired different?
So what you're saying, I'm odd that I came out, as
No,
we
but
said at the beginning,
I'm
with
saying-
a joy of things with wheels and an engine?
No, but I'm saying you're unique in the
wired wrongly?
No, not wrong, not wrong. You're not wired
Easy
wrong.
to wind up, isn't it?
Oh God, here we go. No, I just mean like women are more interested in some things, men are more interested in other things. We are different biologically. So you don't think that the difference between men and women in racing, I agree with what you've just said, but you don't think there's anything to do with that difference is interest in the sport, just a natural, boys like racing, rugby, whatever it is, and girls like whatever it is, girls like fashion, beauty,
Dolls and
whatever.
fluffy things.
I know it's stereotypical, but do you not think
No,
I think there's any difference?
I think it's visibility. I think we look around us. Sorry, that's my dog eating a plastic bag that had treats in it earlier. We look around us, and as youngsters, we take our cues from what we see. So, 50 years ago, how many male nurses were there?
Probably not many.
Because nursing was perceived to be something that
A woman's job.
that women did.
Yeah.
And the doctors were men.
Yeah.
So that was just the way that it worked. But that you wouldn't even think about that now, would you? That you wouldn't expect a nurse to be female and a doctor to be male. So that's had to gradually change over the years. So now actually, a girl wouldn't think twice about aspiring to be a doctor. But if you can't see anybody doing that, if you can't see anybody playing sport professionally, if you can't see any girls out there racing, that's the world saying to you, well, girls shouldn't be doing that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it's a chicken and egg kind of situation. So, you're saying, are we not biologically? Yes, we are biologically different. Of course we're different. Am I horribly competitive? You bet your ass I am, So is there anything instinctively about my makeup that means that I can't drive a rally car as well as the next person? Well, not that I'm aware of,
No.
Finished third in my class on Wales Rally GB. Thank you very much. So, and I think there are, if you look at some of the research that More Than Equal is doing, that yes, there maybe are some differences. So we obviously had the test recently with F3 and F2 where they're trying out different things on the cars with girls in them. So things like, we are, the way that the wheels are positioned, the way that the pedals are, we need to iron out those differences in the technology that we use so that actually whether you are a 6'2" bloke, a 5'7" bloke or a 5'10" woman, you've all got the same chance of doing well in it, because that's why did they change Formula One cars and have a weight limit on them? Because otherwise you needed to be 5'2" as a bloke to race a Formula One car.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you had a massive, the weight impact was massive. So they changed that to make it the same for all blokes. So we just need to look at what we need to change to make it the same for all people.
So you think there will be, let's say, what are those problems then, do you think?
I don't know, because I haven't done the research, but if you speak to, we have different size hands.
Yeah.
You speak to somebody like Abby, she could tell you, she could give you a whole long list of stuff, I've no doubt.
She
You
said,
speak to Tatiana Coulthard,
Yeah.
similar kind of thing.
Yeah. She said, yes, so she touched on the pedals.
Yeah.
And how basically most women's feet are too small on the pedals. So they have to have their own thing, like platform made, so that their feet can sit higher up so they can get the leverage. The wheel width, like with fatness almost.
You've got bigger hands.
Yeah.
We needed smaller wheels so we can grip it.
And one big controversial thing, which on the clips got lots of comments, was power steering needs to be added in Formula 2 and Formula 3 because it's in Formula 1.
Yeah.
I believe it has been added to Formula 2 now.
I'm not sure. She said the F2 teams bosses don't want to do it. I don't know,
Because it'll
something
cost
like
them
that.
money,
'Cause
won't
it'll cost- Yeah, but that's what she said. It was too physical in F2, F3. And she said that was the reason why girls don't progress.
Abby would have people like Abby and Tatiana Coulthard who've raced those cars will be. I would listen to what they say because they know what they're talking about.
I think the only way to shut people up about whether women are as good as men in racing is to just, get the
Give
best
us a level
women.
playing field.
Well, just get them in mixed racing, F3, F2, and go, here's the best team, perform.
Yes, but what you need to do, it's all about the pyramid effect. So if you think of the tens of thousands of young boys who start karting, how many of them make it to the top and get to Formula
exactly,
1?
yeah.
Think of that pyramid shape. If you've only got 1,000 girls that start karting, what shape is that pyramid when it gets to the top? Of course, it's a lot smaller. So what you need to do is to increase the amount of girls competing at that bottom level. So then you will have
More talent coming through.
So at the moment, we're having to slightly skew things in favour of the females to give them more opportunities, which, as we were saying earlier on, when it comes to race as well, like whereas previously, you're saying now being mixed races actually worked in your benefit, but previously there'd be a lot of mixed race people were saying, well, that's absolutely gone against me. So if we have to skew things slightly to make it ultimately a level playing field, well, carry on skewing as far as I'm concerned, because, you're never going to get girls. You're not going to get a girl racing. You're not going to take a 22-year-old girl who's racing in F1 Academy and expect her to get to Formula 1. What you need is an 8-year-old girl starting karting.
Well, that's why I was
having the supreme talent for it, and also not just having the talent, having the dedication, having the the mindset that's going to make them put in the time and effort that's going to make them get to the top. Because I don't need to tell you guys how many supremely talented drivers out there who've never made it because they don't tick all of the boxes you need to tick as a racing driver.
Big one being money as well.
Not just money though. There's a lot of stuff.
I know you need to be
other than
ultra
money, but-
competitive and just super determined,
great
super
management.
disciplined. Yeah.
But that's why I wondered why F1 Academy didn't do something in karting. as you said, like to open like more opportunities in karting, because that's where it all starts.
Well, I think they can't do everything. And I think I mentioned More Than Equal, they're doing a lot of work. They're taking girls who are a lot younger and working with them.
Yeah, that's what needs to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. Motorsport UK has, is working to get more girls involved in karting. So it's a multi-pronged attack at various different levels. And I think the F1 Academy side is the visibility, and that's where the money's going to come from. Okay. That ultimately it's going to be needed to fund the other bits.
Got you.
Can I give you a suggestion as to what I think would be?
Here we go.
There's pros and cons.
Here we go.
There's pros and cons.
On,
there's pros and cons to this. I brought it up before. With some again.
Who said there were pros? Was that just you, or did anybody else agree with you?
No, there are pros and cons. So I'm about to say it. Okay,
I'll bear with you.
So there are. Rather than having an all-girls series, right? Because like you just said, the argument is women can race against men. There's no reason why they can't. So having, in my eyes and a lot of people's eyes, having an all-girls series contradicts that.
Yeah.
Especially to the viewer. Yeah. I know that the pros of that are we've got a series for women, there's role models, and we can funnel lots more into that championship, right? Because you've got 20 spaces for this big F1 Academy championship rather than just 2 spaces in F2 or F3. My thing was having a bit more of a grassroots level. So you've got, again, a karting one, a Formula 4 one, Formula 3, Formula 2, where you've just got a team for the most talented girls in the sport, right? And they can move up as they progress, basically, through Formula 3 to whatever, so long as they are talented, and then they're racing against men throughout their career, and you put that funding that goes into F1 Academy, and you actually fund, 2 drivers and have an all-girls team in Formula 2, Formula 3, Formula 4, and you funnel them through, and their whole lives they're going up against the best of the best, not just the best women.
No, I'm 100% with you there. And if you speak to a lot of the girls I've had conversations with, like, does Abby Eaton want to race in an all-girls series? No, she doesn't.
Actually, none
does
of
Jade
them.
Edwards want to race in Do any of the girls racing in F1 Academy want to
Abby
race in an all-girls series? No, they don't.
But you know what?
But they want to be racing.
I would do it if I had the opportunity to do it as well.
Well, absolutely. Who wouldn't?
Yeah. She went for it.
Cheap racing, cheaper than it should be.
Cheaper
than it should be, and
you're getting to race.
Massive exposure.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Bianca Bustamante or whatever. These girls are becoming not even borderline celebrities in their field, and I'm sure people like Bianca, Abby Pulling are massive role models to girls now to come through, and I completely understand that. But it does contradict that women can race against men. And you know what? I'm really excited.
It doesn't yes, I agree with you in the sense it doesn't utterly contradict that women can race against men. It doesn't highlight that women can and should be racing against men.
Yeah.
But it's a means to an end.
Yeah. I'm really intrigued because obviously Abby, having won F1 Academy twice in the same year, I don't know if you heard about that. She basically won the championship at, was it Qatar? And they then added a race at Abu Dhabi. So she won the championship provisionally and then didn't win the championship and then had to win it again.
Oh, they dropped a race in Qatar, didn't they? They lost a race in Qatar.
Yeah, maybe it was that.
No, they lost a race in Qatar because of it was cancelled because of barrier repairs.
Okay, but to me that seemed quite...
Get your full facts here.
Okay, but they then cancelled that race, but they added another one on in Abu Dhabi. So
they did that in the F4 Championship this year as well. You miss a race at Donington, it gets added on later in the season.
Okay.
And nobody's actually crowned a champion until the final race.
But F1 Academy, Abby or whatever, all posting about being champion, and then all of a sudden you're not anymore.
Well, because they didn't know that race was then going to be added back in.
But then don't add another race.
Why not? Because if you've paid to have 20 races and you've only got 19, you'd be the first one complaining, wouldn't you?
I don't know
the ins and outs of that, I have to say. Yeah. But the precedent is...
I don't think it looks good, is my point.
Okay, but I would say then that traditionally happens. So we had that situation, exact same situation. We have it every year in touring cars in one of the junior championships because they don't get to... There's a big accident, there's a big delay. That race gets punted because we have to go off air at a certain time. Mm. That race then gets inserted again later in the calendar.
Yeah, and I've had it happen before, but I think when there's a championship on the line in the last couple of rounds, I don't know.
Well, as I say, I don't know the ins and outs of what happened, but I do know that the second race of F1 Academy in Qatar didn't happen because of some issue with a barrier repair
Right. Okay.
from an earlier race, I think. So I can only presume, and I don't know, that was that second race being added on to mean that the championship had a number of races it was supposed to have.
Regardless, coming back to it, I'm very excited to see, because Abby Pulling has now won a season in GB3 with Roden.
Yep.
And I'm really genuinely interested to see how she gets on in that. With the physicality stuff that Abby touched on, and she said, which is true from what I've seen, is, girls can do, karting, F4. F4's not too physical, so they're great and they can do well and win races. And then they get to F3 and all of a sudden this physicality thing becomes a bit of a problem. And especially in F2, because she said Jamie Chadwick, when she did the Autosport Award and they put her in the F2 car, she was saying to Abby she could not hold on to the wheel.
Off. Yeah.
It wasn't neck, it was
it was handing onto the wheel. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm super interested to see how she gets along in that. And I'm regardless of what I've said here, I'm not against that at all. I want to be not proven wrong. I want to see a girl racing against men and proving that they can go out there, win championships, win races.
Yeah.
Because I think this F1 Academy is very Marmite. I'm for it and against it. I'm sat in the middle.
As am I. I'm for the visibility. I'm anti the single sex racing series.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Shall we do
conclude?
Yes.
Well, we've got a little activity.
Oh.
A little challenge for you. Well, two challenges. So the first one is, obviously you do media training with drivers.
Yeah.
Could you don't have to, do a little...
You can go if you want. It's been an hour and a half.
You can leave a tiny little interview to Gus and me all together. And we have to give our best, most professional, like we're F1 drivers, answer.
Give us a quick snippet of Louise Goodman's media training.
In the media pen.
In the media pen. What am I? I don't do media training in the media pen.
Sorry,
but just media training. What would you do?
What would I say if you're in the media pen?
Yeah.
I would say the key thing I would say to drivers when you're in the media pen. My key things, my 4 things for all drivers in any situation, before we get onto the little idiosyncrasies of things like the pen, are: number 1, who is my audience? Know who you're talking to. It's not me, the journalist, you're talking to. It's the people who are watching on television, reading in a newspaper or magazine. Do they understand the sport? Is it local TV? If they understand the sport, tell them about your own turn-in understeer. If it's local TV, you tell them that, they'll switch off. So know who you're talking to, know who your audience is, and then you can pitch your answers accordingly. Understand the kind of interview that you're doing, because the way that you would approach a live interview is different to the way that you would approach a pre-recorded interview. A radio interview has its little, idiosyncrasies. So every kind of interview situation is different. So think about what's the journalist agenda, what's on the general agenda at the moment. So if you turn up at a racetrack on a Friday, I might want to ask you what you think about what's happening this coming weekend. I might want to ask you about a controversial incident at the previous round of the championship. So know what the questions are. Ask what the questions are, ask what the topics are. And then finally, think about, what's your agenda? What are you trying to get out of it? Because the interview should be a two-way street. It shouldn't just be about me being in charge and steering the interview wherever I want to take it. As a driver, you should be thinking about, how can I use this opportunity? That's going to be potentially getting commercial references in there. So the easy one being don't just say the team this, the team that, say the guys at insert name of team, the guys and girls at Rodan or whatever it might be. That's an easy win, isn't it? You've got a name check in there. But also just to get your personality across, because ultimately that's what people are going to connect with.
Got you.
They go free.
Could you give us a little exercise? What would you... Did you say once you went in for a media thing?
I remember having a session with you. It was so good. You did your research before.
Yeah.
You do it with every driver.
I do with every driver. Well, because if I'm going to ask some questions, I need to be touching on there.
As soon as we walk through the door, your cameraman's there. Yeah, microphone.
Face.
So, Jordan, and I was like...
Oh, God.
It was really good, yeah. But anyway, we do have another challenge.
I was going to say...
Did I pass that one?
Well, no, I was going to say...
Could you give us a little...
You don't have to.
The challenge was for us. I wanted you to give us a
hard question.
some kind of
to give you a tough
like
question.
ask me, then ask Jordan, then ask me, then ask Jordan, then
But
give us an
I need
evaluation.
to prep. I need to prep for my interviews.
okay,
So what am I
that's
going to
fine,
interview
that's
you
fine.
about?
Well,
you
we'll
haven't
just
been
give
in a
you-
race.
we'll just give you
for
the
a while,
BBC
Gus. You haven't been in a race, has he? Harsh, harsh.
Thanks, Louise. Love you so
Anyway,
much.
You need to finish on the podium as well, Gus, for the interviews. I'm really sorry. But,
I know.
you know.
I didn't do GB this year.
I'm
Maybe
teasing.
next year. I'll come up with some great answers if I do
Yeah,
next year.
please do.
I will do.
Have you played Bop It before?
No.
So this is our it's called the BBC challenge. So BackSeat Bop It challenge. It stands for. Okay. So basically, you have 2 attempts. Only take a minute, and let me just get it. So you have the main game. You have 3. It tells you what to do. So Bop It, you press that. Twist, you do that, and then pull, you do that, and then if you get it wrong, it goes
Yeah.
and you fail.
Where did you get this from?
It gives you a score.
You're in our interview now, Louise. Practice run.
Okay.
So that was 5. Our high score is
back,
who?
touch back.
Josh Hill, was it, on 12? No,
He's gone.
No,
to
Kush
sleep.
got 40 something.
Kush
We'll
got
put it
40.
on the
Do you
screen.
want to play? Do you want to play?
Ruby can
We'll put it on the
Okay.
screen. You get a practice run, and then once you die, that's it. And then the next one is your real go.
So pull it first.
That one's still
What am I
recording.
pulling?
Just checking.
Yeah.
Which end am I
Okay,
pulling?
There's
today
only
we're
one
changing
pull. There's only one pull.
Oh, that's what was that? That's a twist.
No, don't
That's the
twist
twist,
it.
that's the
You have to
pull.
pull the BBC, and then that's it.
Yeah. It's Louise on the BBC, everyone. Oh,
You have to be quick.
that was the slowest reaction to it.
You have to be quite quick.
You've got to
I'm
be
doing
quick.
it in time with
you
the
can, you can,
music.
you can have
Oh, you
no,
can't.
no. You just when it says twist it, just twist it. and
So
pull it.
that was your test.
Is that my
run.
rehearsal?
No, well, okay, yeah. This is it now.
That's
I was
FP1.
going to be nice and give you another
FP2.
practice.
Right,
This is
you have to pull it again.
this
Sorry.
is the race now.
Yeah, this is it. This is it. So bop it.
It's like watching my dad with an
So
iPhone.
Bob pull,
Oh, God, no. Gus. Right, press the middle.
twist, Bob pull.
Oh, it's
Oh,
gone
shut up.
sleep.
Get over yourself.
Pull. There we go. Right, focus, Louise.
There we can go.
Focus. Yeah.
I've never seen this technique before. It's going well. Oh. Oh God.
Getting the hair
Oh my
involved.
God. This is intense.
Get your hair caught.
You can see the competitiveness
Yeah.
in her
you can.
face.
Oh, damn it.
what is
That
it?
was you
We're
talking.
Sorry.
What is it?
14.
14.
No, it must be. No.
40.
Sorry, 44 was that? 44.
We'll hear it in the microphone.
Oh, Jesus, puppy.
Oops.
Oh God. The dog is what whacked the
Anyway,
camera.
thanks for watching, everyone.
Sorry, that's my dog trashing the set.
That's pretty
Trying
much.
to tell us something, Ruby.
That's it.
Stop there. There you go.